Yo, what is up guys, Delboy here. So following Billy Joe Saunders' 11th round knockout win over Marcelo Esteban Cosores, a lot of people have been speculating in regards to Billy Joe Saunders' future at super middleweight, and they've been just, dissecting the performance in general. I have done a post-fight review for this bout. That is on my channel if you want to check that out. But the topic of this video is Billy Joe Saunders' future at 168 pounds. Now, I'm not sitting here and telling you Billy Joe can't get big fights at 168 pounds. He can. There are some good fights out there for him. There are some good names and interesting fights, Caleb Plant, for example, Callum Smith, and David Benavidez. These would all be big fights for Billy Joe Saunders, but the question is, can he compete with these guys at 168 pounds? He can get the fights, but can he compete? I've said this for a while, but for me, Billy Joe Saunders doesn't convince me at 168 pounds. To me, he doesn't look like the same fighter. When Billy Joe Saunders got into shape at 160 pounds with Dominic Ingle, he looked great, he looked a lot more shredded. He looked a lot leaner, and his gas tank looked as good as it ever had been at that point. And these were the fights against Willie Monroe Jr. and David Lemieux. For me, that version of Billy Joe Saunders was the best version of Saunders we've seen. And the 168 pound version doesn't look anywhere near as good as far as I'm concerned. Even when you look at him at 168 pounds, to me he just doesn't look right. He looks a little chunky. He looks fleshy, and while I appreciate this isn't a bodybuilding contest, for me the extra weight clearly has impacted Billy Joe Saunders' performances at 168 pounds. Both his fights with Shifa Isufi and Marcelo Esteban Cosores. For me, Billy Joe Saunders just looks off the pace. His reaction times look drastically slower. He is getting caught quite a lot against Cosores. He got hurt by Shifa Isufi. And, the reaction time just isn't there. The hand speed isn't quite as impressive as it was at 160 pounds, and his feet are a lot slower, in my opinion. And quite frankly, he just looks like a lesser version of himself. He looks like a version of himself who's not been training hard, or who's not going all out in the gym. He just doesn't look right to me. And maybe these performances at 168 pounds are to do with the level of opposition. Maybe Billy Joe can't get up for these type of opponents. That could be possible. That is a thing in boxing. Sometimes when a fighter fights a lower level guy who he can't get up for, the performance isn't as good as we're used to seeing or as we are expecting. And that could be a possibility with Billy Joe Saunders. But to me, the movement doesn't look right. The hand speed doesn't look right. The body doesn't look right. I think this extra weight is detrimentally affecting Billy Joe Saunders' performance in the ring. I really do. And that leads me on to my next point. The version of Billy Joe Saunders we've seen against Isufi and Cosores, would this guy honestly beat Callum Smith, David Benavidez or Caleb Plant? I've got to say, based on these performances, I would make him a substantial underdog against Callum Smith and an underdog against Benavidez and Caleb Plant. I just think Callum Smith is way too big. He's too strong, he's too powerful, and eventually he will catch up to Billy Joe Saunders as Saunders slows down in the second half of the fight. I don't think he can keep Callum Smith honest, to be quite frank. And as for Benavidez, a similar problem. Benavidez isn't as good technically as Callum Smith, but he comes forwards, he's a big dude. He's a powerful puncher. He brings good punch variety, good punch volume. And I believe, again, down the stretch, David Benavidez would be a really, really tough ask for this version of Billy Joe Saunders at 168. And Caleb Plant, maybe he could outbox Plant in a boxing match. But again, Plant, a big dude, tall, long, rangy, more used to the weight, better suited to the weight. I would also have a hard time picking Billy Joe Saunders against Caleb Plant, based on these performances. So the question is, does Billy Joe Saunders bite the bullet, vacate that 168 pound title and move back down to middleweight? I think that would be ideal in terms of his performances, but can he afford to do that? I mean, Billy Joe Saunders, yes, he's a good fighter, yes, he's unbeaten, Yes, he's been around a little while now, and people know who he is, but that belt is really the only bargaining chip he's got. So I think he's stuck between a rock and a hard place, to be honest with you. And he's stuck in a division now where he's not fighting to his optimum performance levels. And, you know, that's on him, really. You know, he messed up what he had at 160. He obviously lost his belt due to testing positive for a PED. And again, we have to consider that as well. Maybe Billy Joe needed a little bit more help to make middleweight. Maybe that's why he looked so good in his last 2 fights at middleweight. You know, aesthetically, Billy Joe looked really good in those fights, and he had a better gas tank. Maybe he was up to something. You know, that's a possibility. It's funny he's not made middleweight since, and it's funny his body's not looked the same since. You know? So, again, maybe Billy Joe just can't make the weight anymore because he got caught out. That's you know, potentially that is true, but to me he looks like a guy who can shed more weight. To me, he looks like a guy who's clearly too big for 168 pounds. That's just my 2 cents, and I would like to see him move back down to middleweight to try to compete with the likes of Gennady Golovkin, Jamal Charlo, Demetrius Andrade, maybe Canelo if Canelo goes back down to 160. I can't see that happening, by the way, but I would like to see Billy Joe Saunders go back down to middleweight, just to see him fight at his optimum level. But, like I said, he's stuck between a rock and a hard place. That belt is really all he's got going for him. And if he vacates, you know, are these guys going to be more likely to fight him? Probably not. You know, it's probably a pipe dream on my behalf. But I would love to see Billy Joe Saunders fight the likes of Golovkin at 160. But it looks like that ship has sailed. And it looks like Billy Joe Saunders is going to be competing at 168 for the foreseeable. And if that's true, I think we've seen the best of Billy Joe Saunders, to be honest with you. Maybe that's overreactionary, but I just don't like what I see at 168 pounds. I can't fathom why people are so confident this guy can beat the likes of Callum Smith or David Benavidez. I've not seen it at 168 pounds. Maybe he can show me something. Maybe when he steps up to that level, he'll improve. That could be true. That could be true, but like I said, I'm not seeing it, man. I'm really not seeing it. And to be honest with you, I think Billy Joe at 168 is just a result of Billy Joe not living the life, not taking boxing as seriously as he should have done, not training as hard as he should have done. And as a result, he's stuck at 168 pounds where, you know, he's not performing at the level he should be. And, you know, time will tell. Maybe Billy Joe will surprise me, but when one of these fights happens, whether it's Callum Smith, Benavidez or Caleb Plant, that's when we'll find out. And me personally, I'm not confident that Billy Joe can beat these guys. Maybe he can beat a guy coming up from middleweight. Maybe that could be a better option. You know, I think a good fight for Billy Joe Saunders right now, to see exactly what he has, would be Billy Joe Saunders versus Danny Jacobs at 168 pounds. Danny Jacobs is moving up to that weight class. He's fighting Chavez Jr. in December, a fight he's going to win. So once Danny Jacobs gets through that, I would like to see Billy Joe Saunders versus Danny Jacobs in the first quarter of 2020. And yeah, I'd like to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below. Tell me how you feel about Billy Joe Saunders standing at 168 pounds. How have you rated his performances at super middleweight? And where would you like to see him go next? If he sticks around at 168, who do you want to see him fight? And also, do you feel the same way I do in regards to Billy Joe Saunders at 168 pounds? Do you also feel that he's too small for that weight class and he's carrying too much weight? Do you believe it's affecting his performances? I'm intrigued to hear your thoughts on that as well. So drop a comment below, tell me what you think. Smash the like on the video, it helps out. And also, if you are new, hit the subscribe button for regular boxing content. We try to cover boxing at all levels. We try to cover multiple divisions on this channel. And yeah, if you just want boxing without BS, hit the sub button. I promise you won't regret it. But anyway, hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. You can expect more in the coming days and weeks. And also I plan on live streaming at least once or twice this week. So look out for that. Time depending, because I've started a new job. But I plan on live streaming at least once this week. I'd like to get one done. But anyway, hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. Peace.